All right, guys, this is Mrs. Beekner, and when you log into your Google Classroom today, what you're going to see waiting for you there is this document that I've got up on the screen. This is a DBQ practice assignment to try to give you guys a little bit more practice with the DBQ in addition to some of the weekend sessions that we're going to be running. All of the documents that I'm going to use and show you guys in the video today are available via link in the document itself, so if you need to go back to something or take a look at it, you should just be able to click on these and they should be live in the document that you have. So the DBQ itself is a decent percent of the grade on the exam, and it's a kind of a specialized type of essay. It's basically, I think the best way to think of a DBQ is that it's like writing a research paper, except that all of the research has been done for you. So you're trying to incorporate both the documents themselves from the DBQ and then also the knowledge that you have on your own. This is one of the big differences for those of you who are taking AP English between the English synthesis essay and then the APUSH DBQ essay, and that is that the APUSH DBQ essay expects not only that you will be able to use the documents in your essay, but also, and this is pretty important, also that you will be able to show your own historical knowledge. So as we're going to talk about as we go through here, you need to make sure that you are showing your own historical knowledge in addition to just like using the documents themselves. Okay. So the new rubric for the DBQ, which you guys have seen, although it may have been a while, is linked in here, and we're going to take a look at it real quick. It's got a bunch of different parts. It's giving you individual points. The way that the DBQ rubric functions is basically that each point is earned separately. So it's not a holistic grade. It's not like they read the essay and they're like, oh, this is a 6. They have to add up each of the points on the rubric itself. So for example, you could get the thesis point here, even if the entire rest of your essay is just, I don't know, a drawing of a cat or something like that. Don't do that. You could still earn the thesis point if you have a solid thesis that makes a historically defensible claim in response to all parts of the question. Right. So the points that you have here are thesis, argument development, and there's kind of a lot going on here, but basically argument development is just looking at, did you sort of back your thesis up in a kind of well-reasoned essay that includes some sort of kind of sophisticated analysis. So not just an essay that like restates the documents, for example, but one that does at least, you know, kind of one of these things that you can take a look at down there. So I'm going to skip over the document usage real quick. The other things that are in the DBQ beyond the documents that you need to have, here's this specific factual information part. This is what I was talking about, where you need to have like a sufficient specific examples of relevant evidence. Not stuff that comes from the documents, but stuff that comes from your own knowledge, that you're using specific details like proper nouns that you can underline. And then the last 2 points on the rubric here, the contextualization point and the synthesis point, can be a little bit confusing sometimes, but basically contextualization is where you're kind of like setting the stage. You're saying, here's other stuff that's kind of going on at the same time. It's not my topic, but it's kind of related to the topic overall. It's like the Star Wars info crawl, if you remember. I'm doing that with Mr. Beekner. And then the synthesis, which is by far the hardest point to get on any of these essays. Synthesis is where you're extending your thesis. So whatever argument you're making in your thesis, you're extending that out by comparing to a different historical time period. So if you had an essay where you were arguing that the, Revolutionary War was very revolutionary, you would have to say in the same way that the Revolutionary War was very revolutionary in its impact on the American government, so too was, World War II very revolutionary in its impact on the American government in X, Y, and Z ways. So you have to be basically making the same argument but in a different time period. The synthesis point is a little bit of a bonus point in some ways. Last year on the 2016 exam, only about 10% of test goers got the synthesis point. So if you just listen to my explanation, or if you've been kind of looking at this in review books or whatever, and you're just kind of like, don't worry about that. It's much more important that you're picking up the other points rather than focusing on like confusing yourself with the synthesis. Okay, so those are the non-document points. The documents themselves, like the kind of meat of the DBQ, the document-based question itself, comes from the 2 points that you can potentially get out of 7 for document usage. There's 2 separate document points. One of them requires you to simply use the documents to support your argument. So this is, you're just talking along, and you say, whatever as seen in document 2, or, document 3 in parentheses, those kinds of things. So you're using the documents correctly, right, in support of the argument that you're making. And this point requires that you use at least 6 of the documents, right? So on these DBQs, there's generally only 6 or potentially 7 documents. And so one of the biggest ways that we see people miss on this point when I grade at the reading is people are only using, at a 4 or 5, like they're using them correctly, but you don't get the point if you don't hit that 6. The second, so that's just a straight up like, did you use the documents in your essay? This is a DBQ. The second of the document points comes from this analysis of documents. And this is where the rubric tends to get a little bit confusing here. You need to analyze 4 of the documents. However, so if you used 6, right, you need to analyze at least 4, although as we'll see, I suggest using more than that. And it's not just analyze though, you need to do it in one of a few specific ways. So you might remember, you might have seen some talk about, like, you'll see HIPPO or HAPPY, or I usually call them the HAPs. That's historical context, audience, intended audience if you're looking at the eye, purpose, and point of view. And I've given you guys a document that you might already have a copy of, I'm not sure, that explains each of those, sort of like what that looks like, and gives some examples. So historical context, audience, intended audience, purpose, and point of view. And so what you're doing for these analyses is that you're trying to use this specific type of analysis for, again, at least 4 of the documents. For me personally, as somebody who grades these essays and as somebody who teaches the class, my favorite one, the one that I think is the best and the one that like works the best, is H, the historical context. What this does, if you take a look at these examples, is it takes the document and then it adds to or shows what else you know that can put that document in context by looking at a specific relevant event that's happening kind of at the same time. So if you take a look at the examples down here, the part that I've got underlined in each of these sentences, that is what would earn you the historical context point for, or the analysis point, excuse me, for that one. Audience is one of those where, like, you can go wrong on this. If you're just writing something where you're like, oh, the audience is the American people, or the audience is people who can read, right? That's probably not, that doesn't help you out very much, right? That's not a very impressive type of analysis. So you're looking more at something in this nature. Purpose, you want to make sure that you're using a really specific verb. I will tell you as a reader that purpose is the hardest one for me to spot. Like when I'm just reading your DBQ and I'm paying attention to it and I'm looking for like where I can give you the points, it can be difficult to just like pull purpose out. So I generally suggest that students, if you're going to do purpose, like really highlight it, and often you want to pair it with another one. So you're not just doing purpose, you're also doing whatever audience or point of view or something like that. Again, you want to use those specific focused verbs. That's the best way to indicate purpose. The last one here, point of view, is the one that I think people mess up the most frequently. It's not just a summary of what the document says, which is really common, unfortunately, but you're essentially saying something about who the author is. Like, are they a woman? Are they Hispanic? Are they someone who is, a Federalist? Are they a Whig? Right? Who are they? And then how does who they are inform what they're saying or drawing or whatever the case is in the document itself? Okay. So those are the HAPs. That's historical context, audience, purpose, and point of view. And again, in your assignment, you have a link to this HAP explanation right there. So as you're going through, and we'll take a look at the assignment in just a sec here, that's there to help you out. The last of the explanatory documents that I have here is something that some of my students like in general, and this is kind of a visualization of what a good flow for the DBQ is, like a good way to kind of put it all together and where stuff should go. You've got, again, your contextualization is a really good way to start the essay. If you want the contextualization point, it can't just be one sentence. It needs to be at least a couple sentences. It can totally be an entirely separate paragraph. I definitely have students do that all the time, but it does fit neatly often kind of before your thesis. Leading into your thesis statement, that's super important. Each body paragraph should have some sort of document analysis. You notice that the teacher who put this together used HIP instead of HAP. The I, again, is just intended audience versus audience. And that you also want to have some sort of outside information to fulfill that SFI point that we talked about on the rubric. And then you want to restate your thesis, and then the best place for a synthesis, if you're attempting it, is definitely going to be in the conclusion. You can put synthesis anywhere you want. It can go anywhere in the essay. It just fits nicely at the end. So this is a nice visual, if you are a visual person, of how a DBQ paragraph should flow. Okay, so let's take a look at your assignment here, what it is that I'm going to ask you guys to do this week. So we are watching the video. Those are all the reference documents. I've pasted in here for you the directions that you're actually going to get on the DBQ, like on the actual AP test. If you just listen to all of that stuff on the rubric and you're like, how am I supposed to remember all of that? Like, how do I know what I'm supposed to do? The answer is that they actually give it all to you directly on the paper. So this is last year's test, the released one that they released, nothing scandalous. So it's 2016 free response questions. If you had somebody who took the test last year, this is what they saw. And what you're looking at here, see question 1, right directions. It's got this, every single thing that we just talked about on the rubric is all listed right here. It's a good, like, you can almost come back and kind of check off like what you've done and what you haven't done. It talks about for the documents, it talks about how many you need to have, see 4 right there, and 6 right there. It talks about synthesis, etc. And then it's going to have the question underneath and the documents themselves. Right, this last one from last year was on feminism, the rise of feminism. And so I've basically given you something that kind of mirrors that, but with a couple small changes. So here's the directions if you need them. Here's the prompt. This is the prompt that I'm going to ask you guys to answer. Go ahead and hold that while I'm in here. So a prompt on the Vietnam War, which you've already done some reading about over break, and which we're going to continue to talk about this week in our video notes. And then I've given you documents. I know they're a little bit blurry. I apologize for that. That's just a screen capture issue that we have. And under each document, what I'm going to ask you to do in this little chart, each of the documents has them, is to fill in for me examples of things that you think you could use for historical context, audience, purpose, and point of view. Not every single document will work for every single HAP. Like, you might look at one of these documents and be like, I don't know what the point of view is, or there really is no good audience for this, or I have no idea what else was going on in 1964 that I could use for historical context. Hopefully that's not true, but you don't have to have every single box here filled out. Consider this like brainstorming. Like, it's your 15 minutes, you're brainstorming in your essay, right? You're trying to figure out what to do. So you'll see for each of the documents that I gave you in here, there's a little chart underneath, right? So you're filling out the chart with as much of the HAPs as you can, kind of pre-writing, brainstorming, etc. Brainstorming, 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 brainstorming. I just put one on each page because the formatting was getting a little weird. And then when you're done with all 6 of the documents that I've given you, I'm going to ask you to write the DBQ itself, a full DBQ, so a full, however many paragraph essay you feel is necessary to answer the question in the space below. When you have finished writing your DBQ, you can click submit or turn in, which should be up here in your version, and I will go through, Mrs. Biegner, I will go through and add whatever commentary I can to try to give you guys some feedback back on the DBQ itself. So this is a classwork and a writing grade. When I look at this, I'm going to be looking for 2 things. I'm going to be looking to see if you did some brainstorming in the chart, the HAPs chart. I should see some HAPs for each of those. Right? And then, of course, I'm going to be looking at the DBQ itself. Is it full and complete? Please don't bother turning this in if you're just giving me like 2 paragraphs, right? A full essay. And then, obviously, the essay itself, how well did you do? I'll try to give you an overall score and a few comments as well. Okay? So this is your DBQ practice on the Vietnam War that you guys are going to be working on all week. Any questions, as always, you are welcome to email me directly. And don't forget that the reference documents are all linked here directly in the assignment itself. Thanks, guys, for your time, and good luck with the DBQ.